Before you listen to this BBC podcast, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Stevie Middleton, and I'm a BBC commissioner for a load of sport podcasts. I'm lucky to do that at the BBC because I get to work with leading journalists, experienced pundits, and the biggest sports stars. Together, we bring you untold stories and fascinating insights straight from the players' mouths. But the best thing about doing this at the BBC is our unique access to the sporting world. What that means is that we can bring you podcasts that create a real connection to dedicated sports fans across the UK. So if you like this podcast, head over to BBC Sounds where you'll find plenty more.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, keeping you up to speed with everything you need to know as we head into another crucial weekend of action. It's Friday the 3rd of May, I'm Jane Lewis, and here's what's coming up.
Oh, it's fabulous from Jane Forrest! What a strike from the edge of the box!
Celtic look to stay 3 points clear at the top of the Premiership, but can Hearts get the better of them for the third game in a row? Also,
Tavernier looks up at the cross.
What a
and
ball
it comes
that
with a ball, and
What
it
a cross
goes!
that is.
Cyril Dessers scores! Potentially one of the biggest goals in Rangers season!
can Rangers keep the pressure up as they host a buoyant Kilmarnock? And
Would rather be in our position than within Ross Counties for sure. So it's just about doing much better next time out.
We now have 4 games, 3 are at home, and we have to look forward.
who's feeling the heat at the foot of the table?
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
Well, joining us for this podcast is Stephen Craigan, former Motherwell captain, and making his debut with us, delighted to say, is Daniel Caw from the Daily Record. Don't worry, Daniel, we'll be very kind to you because it's your first time, don't worry. Lots to get through with Stephen and Daniel, but first of all, let's round up the latest Scottish football headlines. Motherwell manager Stuart Kettlewell says supporters would enjoy Scottish football a heck of a lot better without VAR. Something else they might enjoy more is football without pyrotechnics. A Scottish Football Supporters Association survey suggests that 2/3 of fans believe they detract from the overall experiences of supporters at games. Inverness Cally Thistle manager Duncan Ferguson insists that the relegation playoffs have not been up for discussion as his 9th place side face a must-win final game against Morton in the Championship tonight. Falkirk say they've sold out their home allocation of tickets for Saturday's trophy presentation. They have the chance to go the entire League One season undefeated as they face Alloa. And Rangers misfit Sam Lammers, who is currently enjoying a successful loan spell at Utrecht, has been named Eredivisie Player of the Month.
The Scottish Football Podcast.
Well, guys, let's start with the tussle at the top. And people have been saying that there could be more twists in the title race. This weekend, I wonder, Stephen Craigan, if this could be the weekend.
Well, we thought that last weekend. We thought there may have been issues for Rangers going to St Mirren and Celtic going to Dundee, but they managed to get over the line. I think both managers will probably expect a little bit more from their teams. They showed a few deficiencies, but of course they managed to get over the line. But when you look at Celtic this weekend at home to Hearts, beat Rangers, and it's very easy to say and it's simple to say that, but that must be great motivation for Brendan Rodgers and his players to know that they've got 2 home games against the 2 teams just below them. It's in their own hands. They're more than good enough to go and do so. So I'd imagine that'll be their motivation this season. For Rangers and Philip Clement, I think the performance has to be better than what it was last weekend against St Mirren. If they turn up and produce that at home to Kilmarnock and away to Celtic, I'm afraid they won't get anywhere close to getting 6 points. So I don't think we could have imagined 5-6 weeks ago Rangers would have a little bit of a slump. I just think they lack a little bit of creativity at times. They haven't been on the ball, but it certainly sets it up nice from a neutral perspective, from the outside looking in. We've been destined for a title race, a close one, and we've certainly got it this season.
Yeah, the title race is very, very much alive, Daniel. Stephen mentions there, makes it sound very simple. Celtic, all they have to do is beat Hearts at home. But in saying that, Hearts have got a pretty decent record recently against Celtic, haven't they? They've won their last 2 against them.
Beaten them home and away so far this season, which is not a bad record against Celtic. And, the Celtic defence has taken a bit of stick recently. It's been pretty leaky in recent weeks. And when you've got a player like Lawrence Shankland up front, he might just need one chance. I don't know what you think, Stephen, being a centre-half about Celtic's defence. I think Liam Scales has taken a lot of stick recently, but I don't know if it's all on him. If you're Brendan Rodgers, would you make any changes going into the game? Or
Well, he hasn't deviated from that partnership when they're both fit. So I'd be very surprised at this stage of the season if he tries to do something a little bit different just to upset it a little bit. There's no doubt that Cameron Carter-Vickers is the best centre-half in the league by far. Greg Taylor and Alistair Johnson like to get forward. So as a Celtic centre-half, you have to defend 1v1 an awful lot. But what you do notice, and even back when I played, if there was a deficiency or someone who you thought was under a little bit of pressure, was struggling on a no-firm team, you would almost play on them and try and get a little bit of change from them. And I think teams are doing that with Liam Scales. They're putting their more potent centre-forwards or their pace down that side just to try and exploit them. And I think teams done it to Connor Goldson recently. I think when he was going through a sticky spell, you can see, I remember Motherwell going to the Ibrox when they won, and Theo Bear almost man-marked Connor Goldson because he knew you'd get the better of him. So that's what teams have to try and do. If you think there's a sense of vulnerability, you have to go and try and capitalise on it. So, but I would still be surprised if Brendan would deviate away from a partnership that's got them within the brink of winning the title.
The other thing, Jane, that I think is really important going into the Celtic game at the weekend is potentially Dyson Maida coming back into the fray. I know Brendan Rodgers is kind of hinted at that. He could be absolutely crucial for Celtic. If they've got him on the left, if they've got James Forrest back in form on the right, that's going to be so hard for Hearts to contend with. And Celtic, I know they've lost home and away in the last two to Hearts, but they did beat them 4-1 at Tynecastle the first time they met, and if they play anywhere near that at the weekend, I think they'll get all 3 points.
Yeah, Daniel mentions James Forrest there. He has burst into life right at the right time of the season, I think, probably from Brendan Rodgers' point of view, Stephen, hasn't he?
He's been excellent. I was on Sports Team last week and we were discussing it and saying that he could be the pivotal player now over the next 3 or 4 games to get them over the line in the title. Someone who, I wouldn't say supporters have forgot about, but almost he's been in cold storage for such a long time. And the way Brendan spoke about him a number of weeks ago, you would think he was 42 years of age, never mind 32 years of age. So it's just such a bright spark. He's got such a connection with the club and the fans. He knows what it means to play in big games, to score in big games, to be the key player. Not only just for Celtic, but I tipped him actually to go to the Euros this summer. I think he's a player who Scotland need because he can give them a little option to change the shape. Wing back's not a specification as a Scotland player, but he can play there if need be. If Scotland need a goal and they need wingers, which they don't tend to have in their squad, James Forrest is right up that street. He knows international football. So I think any manager would love a James Forrest in their team. He's got a little rich vein of form, and there's no doubt that Hearts will not be looking forward to playing against him. But Daniel was right with Dyson Maida, because he's got the one thing that other teams are desperate for is raw pace. And pace just frightens the life out of defenders. He stretches defences. He means fullbacks are wary of getting forward and leaving 70, 80 yards in behind it for him to run into. So I think that just gives Celtic a different dimension. And as I said, with that thought in their mind, knowing when the next 2 home games you're champions, surely they will thrive in that.
Oh, Stephen, I can see you breaking out in a sweat, thinking of even having to mark the likes of Dyson Maida.
Dear, don't talk to me about it.
Let's move on to the following day. Of course, it's Rangers against Kilmarnock. And if Celtic win, then the pressure goes back on Rangers. And it's another fixture, Daniel, that Rangers maybe won't be looking forward to. Kilmarnock have been really, really good against the Old Firm this season.
Not only that, Jane, I think Kelly are going to be so fired up for this because they've only lost 3 of the last 22 games in all competitions, 2 and 19 in the league. But of course, the 2 have been against Rangers. And I think Derek McInnes will be so fired up to finally get a result. And do you know what? I kind of fancy them too. As you say, they've been brilliant against the Old Firm. You can't underemphasise the job Derek McInnes is doing there. It's been a fantastic job. And I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised to see them at least get a draw at Ibrox at the weekend.
Yeah, Derek McInnes up for manager of the season, of course, one of the 3 contenders. How have they achieved those results against the Old Firm this season, Stephen, do you think?
Well, the one thing you now get when you play Kilmarnock is you get a difficult game. We always go back to Derek as being well organised, well structured, hard to play against, but I think they've been a little bit more than that this season. I think they've been brave. They went and had a go at the Old Firm. Yes, they've had to be selective because if you go toe-to-toe and you open up and you throw everybody forward, there's an opportunity to be picked off. But they found the balance right of when they all attack and when they all defend. And that's crucial for your players to understand those moments in the game when it appears for you. Derek had a major turnover of player in the summer. Clearly knew last season wasn't good enough. Staying in the Premiership was key for them. But this season, you could tell by the players, the quality of player they brought in, that they were going to go and have a go. And what stood out for me with Jim was, they haven't probably played the Old Firm recently, but it's January transfer window movements. He brought in Kevin Van Veen and Greg Stewart, and everyone thought, wow, best piece of business. There's no many clubs have brought in those kind of players. They've only had one start between them, and that was Greg Stewart. Kevin Van Veen hasn't started a league game. So what he's done is he's got the best out of Kyle Vassell and out of Marty Watkins. So as much as he's bringing players in to enhance his first 11, he's actually done it with the players he has because they've put pressure on those players. So that's senior management. That's someone who's been around the game a long time and knows what's needed at certain stages of the season. So, I mean, you look at them this season, they've won more games than last season. They've lost fewer games, they've scored more goals, and they conceded less goals. That's not just by luck or by chance. That's by being well structured and a manager know what he's doing. So, absolutely, he should be up for manager of the season.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
Let's just jump back to Saturday's other fixtures now. St Johnstone, of course, only the 1 point clear of that relegation playoff spot. They travel to Pittodrie to face Aberdeen. They'll be desperate for the 3 points, won't they, Daniel? Can you see them getting it? Because they were really poor last weekend, weren't they?
Actually, Jane, I can kind of see a Craig Levein special at Pittodrie. I can see him going there with his tactical nous. I think St Johnstone will get something. I don't know if it will quite be all 3 points, but I just think Aberdeen are going to be so deflated after that semi-final a couple of weeks ago. St Johnstone, as I say, with Craig Levein, I just can't see St Johnstone losing at the weekend.
Well, I would imagine...
You're laughing, Stephen.
Yeah, I am, because St Johnstone fans probably can't see them winning. That's the key. What I would say is they've been better away from home under Craig Levein than they have been at home. I don't think they've won at home since the middle of December. And I think 3 of the next 4 games are away from home. So that's a blessing in disguise for them. If they are going to stay up, it's going to be away from home, where it seems to probably suit them a little bit better, where they can sit a little bit deeper, they can draw teams onto them and potentially hit in the counter-attack. But I have to say, what a great job that Peter Levein has done, because when they beat Kilmarnock in the Scottish Cup, there was a buoyancy about them. Neil Warnock then leaves the job. I watched them against Dundee 3 or 4 days later, and they were dreadful. And I really thought to myself, Peter Levein's put himself under all sorts of pressure. But since then, they've shaped up so differently. I think they conceded 1 goal in 5 games. They took Celtic to, in the Scottish Cup, penalty kicks. There's a bounce about them that they know they're probably away from trouble. They'll be surprised if they get relegated from now on in. So, they might play with a little bit more of a freedom, whereas St Johnstone, looking over their shoulder. Ross County, I think 3 of their 4 games at home, and they're strong at home. They play Ross County in the midweek fixture in a couple of weeks. They didn't play well against Hibs, so I just think all the momentum's with Aberdeen, and I'll go the opposite of Danny. I can't see St Johnstone winning, I'll have to say.
Yeah, Aberdeen unbeaten in the league in their last 5 now. Stephen there mentioned Peter Levein and the job that he's done. Daniel, what do you think that he's got about him as a coach? Because that probably is where it's coming from, his kind of coaching skills, maybe rather than man management skills. Would that be fair?
No, I think so. The one thing that's kind of struck me, Jane, whenever he certainly speaks, he's very calm. There's been a lot of kind of chaos at Aberdeen, kind of upheaval. But whenever he speaks, he just, this is what we're going to do. This is the objective. We're going to do it. And I don't know, that I think this might shock you both, but I've never been a professional footballer. But had I
really? Been... Listen, Daniel, some people question if I've never been one, but there you go.
Well, if I had been a professional footballer, guys, that I think would calm me down. I definitely think that would kind of keep you on the right track if you've got a guy at the helm who kind of knows what he's doing and just kind of gets on with it. So I think he has, as Stephen says, he's done a really remarkable job under really tough circumstances.
Yeah, he has indeed. Let's look to Ross County, of course, the other club teetering as well with that relegation playoff spot. They're looking to claw back St Johnstone, as we say, just a point between them. They take on Hibs at home. And actually, they've got a pretty decent record at home. And Ross County look to have a bit of grit and steel about them, don't they, Stephen? Right now.
Well, we all thought that until last weekend when they went to Livingston.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that's very true.
And I think that'll be the disappointing thing for Don Cowie, that their away record under him hasn't been great. But the fact they beat Rangers at home, it almost felt that was a turning of the tide for them. But they thought, right, okay, they found themselves. They've got a kind of marquee result that they can build on and they can push on. Suddenly they go to Livingston, who looked well out of it. I still think it's a big ask for Livingston, but to go there and to lose, particularly the first goal and the manner they did, put you on the back. But Livingston's always a tough place to go with regards to having to chase the game down, and Ross County struggled. However, you're right, Jane. I think their home form's been good. Three of the next four games are at home, which should make them or give them a little bit of comfort. But Hibs are playing with the freedom in a way that, they won't get relegated. They're going to finish 7th. That's where Hibs are probably going to finish for me. So they're playing with a little bit more of an openness about them. However, Don Cowie knows his players have to dig deep. It's crucial. They don't want to be in that playoff. They were last year and they managed to get out, managed to scrape their way out of it. It's not a good pressure to be under. They'll know all that. However, they will believe one result against Hibs could turn it around and just push them forward again.
And Hibs actually had a really good result last time out on the back of the statement that came out from the club talking about bottom six was unacceptable, the performances were unacceptable, and Nick Montgomery actually came out of that looking not in pretty decent shape, didn't he, in terms of able to channel that into getting a good result last time out.
The thing about Hibs is, and you could say this probably for a few teams in the Premiership, you've got no clue what Hibs is going to turn up. You've got absolutely no clue. They look to me, Hibs, like a team that are really happy. The pressure of finishing top six is gone now. As Stephen says, they're 7th, probably not going to finish any lower, certainly won't finish higher. And the players are pretty happy with that. They've got freedom about them. But see, just going back to Ross County, Jane, I've got a real soft spot for Simon Murray. I just wanted to give him a little shout out. 18 goals this season now. Yeah. More goals than Kyogo, which is for a team in a relegation fight is really impressive. And I wouldn't bet against seeing him on the score sheet this weekend either.
Jane, I have to say, I can't get excited about Hibs winning games in the bottom six just because expectation, the squad, the finances involved around infrastructure, which is all great, but Hibs being in the bottom six doesn't sit right, and I think the Hibs fans will agree with that. And yes, Nick Montgomery may have felt good last weekend winning away to St Johnstone, but they really wanted to be in amongst the top guys pushing for European football, getting themselves back to where they should be. So, yes, it's nice for them to win games and the players are playing with the freedom, but does it have the same age as what a top six game does? I don't think so for them anyway.
Yeah, it certainly has been a disappointing season overall from a Hibs point of view. You mentioned Livingston there earlier, Stephen. Of course, they play your old side, Motherwell, at Fir Park. Are Motherwell safe? I mean, you kind of want to say yes, but arithmetically, they're not quite there, are they?
No, they're not. But you're talking about motivation for players and what kind of stirs you up on a Friday night and a Saturday morning, and I think the Motherwell players knowing if they beat Livingston, that will be them. I think that takes them to 40 points. I'd be amazed if anybody got relegated or even was involved in the playoff with 40 points. I can't see it happening. So that's the real edge that Motherwell have to go into the game with. Livingston gave themselves a little bit of hope last week after that win against Ross County. I still think it's a big step for them. Motherwell, I expect them to win the game because I think they're a better team and I think they've had a better season than what Livingston have. They've got game changers in the team. Theo Bear's been good. Blair Stittle's gone off the boil a little bit. And that's not an arrogance about Livingston, but if Motherwell want to stay in the top flight, if you can't beat the team at the bottom of the table at your home ground, then serious questions will have to be asked. So they've got away games next. I think it's Hibs and Ross County away, back-to-back for Motherwell next. So they really have to look at it and think, we need to pick up 3 points to relieve the pressure because they don't want to get into the next 2 games with that shadow on the shoulder of someone breathing down their neck. They've got a chance to give themselves that breathing space and secure the safety. So fingers crossed from a Motherwell perspective.
In saying that, Daniel, though, Livy, I guess, will go to Fir Park with a bit of a spring in their step after that really, really impressive win last weekend, which has given them a bit of slim hope, and they'll be clinging on to that for dear life, won't they? That hope that they can survive.
Absolutely. We mentioned Hibs playing with a kind of freedom before. I wonder if there's a few Livingston players that are kind of resigned to their fate and are kind of that gives them a little bit of freedom to just go and play their football. That's certainly the impression I got last week. But I mean, just going back to what Stephen was saying there, I think I'm right in saying there's scenarios where if Motherwell do win, they're mathematically safe at the weekend. I think if they win and Ross County don't, so I think that kind of carrot, I agree with Stephen. I think Motherwell at home, I think they'll get the 3 points.
There could be a potential cracker as Dundee take on St Mirren. That European football spot, the 5th spot, up for grabs. Only, the 2 points between them in the table. It would be massive, for either of these sides to get to Europe. How do you see this one going, Stephen? Since we're all about predictions in this podcast, what are you thinking?
Well, I'll leave the predictions to Danny. I'll just give you my thoughts on the game. It's funny because both Dundee and St Mirren played really well just last weekend against the Old Firm. They really took the game to them. Both managers said they would. So I think that's what makes it more intriguing this weekend. They're both coming off the back of good performances. Yes, disappointed with the goals they conceded and what they brought from it. Dundee have been a surprise package. St Mirren have been in the top 6 all season. Dundee win, you're right, and suddenly they're in the driving seat. St Mirren winning, you would think they're almost into Europe. St Mirren's form hasn't been great recently. I think the way they've dropped off, Stephen will be disappointed with results. Performances have been good, but you want games with an edge to it. And this is what I like about the top 6 and the bottom 6. Some people argue against it, but you get teams in the same area of the league going for something like Europe, like relegation. So I think just adds to the spectacle. I'd imagine there'd be a huge crowd. There'd be a big crowd at Dens Park. St Mirren lost 4-0, I think, back in November. Stephen Robinson, it will still sting with them. However, it's all set up nicely. I mean, genuinely one of those games, they're both evenly matched. I really couldn't call a winner this stage. I think St Mirren would take a point. If they could leave Dens Park with a point, knowing they've got a couple of home games coming up, Jane, I think they would take that.
Listen, guys, thank you very much indeed. Lots of football to look forward to this weekend. It is time, though, to wrap things up, but it will be a nerve-jangling final weekend of fixtures across the lower leagues, with relegation playoff places still to be decided in the Championship, Leagues 1 and 2. For more in-depth analysis of all that, listen back to yesterday's podcast when Jonathan Sutherland was joined by Ryan Stevenson and Craig Telfer. Well, the Championship games take place this evening as we record. That's the final round of Championship games. Dundee United against Partick Thistle will be live on BBC Scotland Channel from 7:30. As ever, Sportsound will have all the action across the weekend for you on BBC Radio Scotland, and Sportscene will bring you all the highlights on Saturday, Sunday and Monday evenings. My thanks to Stephen and Daniel for joining us on this podcast, and my thanks to you for listening as well. Enjoy your football this weekend, wherever you are. Bye-bye.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. All the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.